Today I'm having a look at a fantastic case from Fractal Design, and I might add it is affordable, there's plenty of room, and lots of water cooling potential. It is the Define S case. Now, the one that I will be reviewing today is the windowed version, and that one I believe retails for around $89. You can get a non-windowed version of it, and that one's around $10 less at approximately $79. So let's get on with the review. It comes in this rather plain box, but it does have lots of information about the product on it. As for packaging, there's two pieces of styrofoam on either end, and the case itself is in a plastic bag. Included is an accessory box, and in it are cable ties and all the screws required for mounting the hardware, plus brackets for actually attaching a reservoir, and I'll show you how that works in just a minute. Also, they include a user's guide and support information. Now, currently this case is only available in a black color. I'm sure some people are hoping that it will come in white. Who knows? That could possibly happen. And there's a windowed version and a non-windowed version. I'll show you on the screen now what the non-windowed version looks like. You have the option with that panel to put either a 120 or 140 millimeter fan on it, which is great. You can pull in a lot of cool air, especially where it counts over the CPU and video card. Also, with that particular panel, you can actually hide the fan hole if you want to, because they have a cover if you choose, of course, not to have a fan installed and you want that panel to be plain. Now, this case measures in at 230 millimeters wide, 451 millimeters high, and 520 millimeters deep. That's very deep, which is good, and when you see the inside, there's a ton of space to install stuff. Now, if you want to go with the actual dimension when it comes to the feet, the screws, and the protrusions, that's a little bit different. The width is the same, but the height and depth are different. The height, instead of 451, is 465, and the depth is, well, it's a little bit deeper at 533 millimeters. Also, it weighs in at 8.5 kilograms. At first glance, there really doesn't seem like there's a lot going on here at the top, but in fact, there is. They include 3 removable covers. They just pull up like so. Each has acoustic dampening material in them, and of course you can remove the other 2 if you want to install more fans. You can install up to 3 120 millimeter or up to 3 140 millimeter fans. Alternatively, you can install a 180 millimeter fan, but with 165 millimeter hole spacing. That's very important. Now, what about radiator support? No problem. You can fit a radiator that is up to 420 millimeters. Also at the top are 2 USB 3 ports. They look like USB 2 ports, but in fact, they are not. I'm loving this black color. A quality power button, as well as a reset button, and audio jacks for the headphone and microphone, and you have a status LED at the top front. Notice how there's no branding at all on the outside of this case. Now, the front panel is plastic. It can be removed by pulling at the bottom, and there's lots of ventilation on both sides of the panel, and it does have this brushed aluminum look. So let me take that off. There's nothing connecting the front panel to the case, and that's great. Now, I do have some branding here on the inside. It says Fractal Design, Define S. You can see there's a large dust filter. There's a couple of magnets on this side, but it swings on the other side, and it's punched out a little bit. That's good, because there's a space, between the fan or fans and this dust filter that can reduce sometimes that whining or buzzing noise that you get when the fans are too close to the dust filters. Notice there's also ventilation right here. Like the top of the case, the front has lots of fan and radiator options. You can fit up to 3 120 millimeter or up to 3 140 millimeter fans, and a radiator that is up to 360 millimeters. Very, very impressive. Now, this fan that they include is their dynamic Gp14 fan. It's a 140 millimeter 1000 RPM speed fan, and it intakes cool air. Okay, so maybe you want to go completely fan mad. Well, you kind of can at the front of this case if you take off this dust filter. I know, why would you want to remove it? Well, you know what? It's your choice to do so. If you have a clean place, it's not a big deal. You can actually fit fans at the very front, so between this part, the front, and then the front of this panel. So they'll be tucked away in here. Lots of ventilation on either side of the panel, so you don't have to worry about that. Why would you do that? Well, maybe you want to have fans here on the outside, then put the radiator on the case itself, and then maybe have more fans behind it, and you could have some kind of push and pull scenario going on with that particular setup. But you have that option. We've already established the fact that there's a window on the left side panel, but the right side panel is plain. At the back of the case, they include the same 140mm fan as is at the front of the case, but this one exhausts air. Here's where the motherboard's I/O shield plate gets installed. They include 7 white ventilated expansion slots, and at the bottom is where a standard ATX power supply gets installed. And note that they have some rubber on the inside here where the power supply makes contact with the case. That's good to cut down on vibrations and to also cut down on scratching the case. Now, as well, each of the thumb screws are not going anywhere, so you can, take them out like so and you won't lose them. That's good. They stay attached to each side panel. You have 2 thumb screws on each panel. Just look at how much space there's inside this case, and that's mainly due to the fact that it's deep, but also it has no external 5¼ drive bays. And you know what? I couldn't care less, because you can get an external optical disc drive if you want to. Now, remember those brackets I mentioned about attaching a tank? Well, these are the brackets, and they go to the tank, and then they can get mounted here in this part of the case, and you can slide the tank up and down. So there's a provision for that. Now, the case fits standard ATX, micro ATX, and mini ITX form factor motherboards. There is plenty of rubber grommeted holes to route the cables through, and there's lots of space behind the motherboard tray and the right side panel. Now, you might be asking, where do you fit the drives? Well, I'll show you that when we get over to the opposite side of the case on the back of the tray. At the bottom of the case is a great place to mount a pump. You can install an optional 120mm or a 140mm fan, and as I mentioned before, at the back is where a power supply gets installed. They also have 4 rubber rests for the power supply to lodge on. Now, there's no fancy expansion slot design here. They just use thumb screws, and that's perfectly okay. While we're on the inside, have a closer look just underneath the top panel to give you some idea how you can install up to 3 120mm or up to 3 140mm fans. Alternatively, you can put a radiator that is up to 420mm. While the right side panel is plain, they do have acoustic dampening material on it. And voila, here is where you can install the drives. In this area, there are 3 of these plates. You just remove 1 thumb screw, take this out, mount the drive to it. Can be a 3.5 inch or a 2.5 inch. By the way, they do have rubber grommets here for the mechanical drive. And then just screw the thumb screw in place, and it's installed. Similar kind of setup here, but these are only for 2.5 inch drives. And indeed, there's plenty of space behind the motherboard tray and the right side panel, plus punch outs to organize the cables. And this is a nice touch. They include branded Velcro straps. At the bottom, there are 4 rather tall rubber feet, and that's good, especially if you have the case on a soft surface. Notice a removable dust filter for both this optional fan that you can install and also the power supplies fan. Other than this case not having an external 5¼ inch optical disc drive, it is just outstanding. I think the overall appearance is sharp. It is super simple and elegant looking. You can get it with a window or without. Tons of space to work on the inside. Plenty of water cooling and fan options. Also, decent drive space in this case as well. Overall, this is a kick-ass product. Until next time, take care.